I think to start a theatre company at that time, now that the company has been successful and it's 35 years old, it may seem terribly daring, but really it wasn't. We spent the 4 years, myself and Marie Mullen, one of my co-founders, spent the 4 years while we were in university doing plays. We wanted to go on doing plays, and therefore the obvious solution to anybody who's 22 who wants to do these things is, why not start a company of our own? We certainly knew we hadn't the remotest idea of accessing professional theatre, and in any case we wanted to do plays in the west of Ireland, not in Dublin, which felt very distant from us. And so along with Mick, Lally, our third co-founder, who was a teacher and an actor in the Irish language theatre in Galway at the time, on Thaviarc, we said, we'll found Druid, and we did. And yeah, yes, it was daring and all of those things, but as I said, we were the age we were, we had nothing to lose, and we were very passionate about what we were doing. So we just went out there and made it work. The Druid now is not the Druid of 10, 15 years ago, and as the person who's the longest serving Druid, I probably am entitled to be able to say that because I've seen it. The company probably has survived by the fact that it has evolved and that it's changed, and it's changed the way it does things from time to time, probably on 3 or 4 major occasions. I think that in 1979 we got our own space, seated 46, but suddenly we had our own space and could be identified with a space rather than performing in local halls. In 1983 we began a relationship with one of Ireland's greatest writers, Tom Murphy, who was very successful Irish writer. I think that helped the maturing of the company. We went on to a very rich relationship with him over a period of years, and a relationship indeed that continues and is continuing. Then we survived the tricky period for all companies when its founders and original founding artists left in the late 80s, and I left myself for a period of time, and the company survived that. And then began to get a very strong track record and new work. We then won international acclaim, although we'd been touring in the US and the UK for some time. We won international acclaim on Broadway with the Martin McDonagh plays, and began to develop major projects like the Druid Synge Project, which we're going to continue to do. So I think one of the things that has helped keep the company going is that it has been able to turn around in the water very quickly and do something very different, which has meant that it has avoided the morass that can happen when an organisation becomes institutionalised. And Druid, because of its size, has managed to avoid that. Well, I was attracted to his work in a kind of roundabout way, in the sense, in that first season in Druid, we decided we'd do a repertoire of 3 plays. And we decided, because it was the summer months, and what we used to locally call Yanks, i.e. the American tourist influx came, we decided we had to provide something for. So Synge was the answer, the Playboy of the Western world. And we agreed to do it. And it was only about halfway through rehearsals, and indeed it was one of the very big bonding between myself and Mick, Lally and Marie Mullen at the time, that we turned around and we said, you know, this isn't an old-fashioned play from 100 years ago. This is a wonderful, fierce, violent, passionate, brilliant play. And if Druid survives its founding months, we'll do it again, and we'll try to do it properly the next time. So we did it on a number of occasions, and out of that came the idea of doing all of the plays together. He's a writer who had a tragically short life. His entire canon is only 6 plays, and the works are he had a very distinctive worldview, so they're very canonical. And this had never been done before, and we thought to do these plays from the very famous, like Playboy of the Western World and Riders to the Sea, with the one company, and to do the lesser plays as well, could make for an extraordinary enlightening process, both for us as a modern ensemble and for fans of Synge's work. I mean, I think Synge's work is extraordinary in its influence, that despite the fact that his entire canon can be played over 8 hours, he's had such a fundamental influence on all the writers who came after him. Very, very different writers, from Beckett to Friel to Murphy to Enda Walsh, Marina Carr. You can see they're all entirely different writers, but you can see Synge's influences in every one of them. They have in common Martin's extraordinary imagination, and also in particular because in the Cripple of Inishmaan, as opposed to the 3 plays of the Renan trilogy, in the Cripple of Inishmaan he's deploying a cast of 9 characters, whereas the other plays have only 4 characters. So therefore you're more aware of what an extraordinary craftsman he is for the theatre. How Martin can write 1 or 2 lines, set a little plot point going, and at the end of the show you realise, without you knowing it, without realising it, he's tied up every single one of those things. I think it's something that certainly in the early years, I mean, the extraordinary imagination and his ability to tell a theatre story and his ability to create extraordinary characters has been acknowledged. But the sheer brilliance of his craft is something that seems to me has not got enough attention. And yet it's something I'm so aware of every time I'm working on his plays.
You're from the west of Ireland. Did you have an affinity with his plays?
I do have an affinity for his plays, but not because of the west of Ireland. For Martin, the west of Ireland is not necessarily the west of Ireland as I experience it. It's the west of Ireland of his imagination. Martin was in some ways very like Synge, in the sense that he wrote that the west of Ireland and those people fired his imagination to create this very distinctive, imaginative universe that has a relationship to, but is not a documentary fidelity to those areas. So I think Martin is precisely the same with very different plays as Synge in that. So with Martin, you know, it's like all his characters as well. They're all adults, but they behave like monstrous children. And so in the respect that I don't know any adult who persistently is like any of Martin's characters, but I recognise all aspects of people I know and myself in Martin's characters. When I read a new play, I mean, within a few pages I know whether I want to read more or not. Like anybody probably reading anything, but I suppose my reading of a new play is informed. Has this got the fundamentals that will be required in order for me to read on? Can the writer write dialogue? Can the writer create characters that I want to know more about? Within a few pages of that, I will know whether that is the case or not. Then I will read through to the end and have to answer questions like, has this writer created a world that I'm interested in? Characters that I understand, not necessarily a play I understand. I don't necessarily understand a play on even a first or second or third reading, but I will understand about whether there's something there that seduces me, something there that I want to go back to. The best thing I can say about a play on a first reading is I want to read it again as soon as possible. I will also be looking for naturally, inevitably when I read a play, certainly for a second or third time, which means I'm seriously interested in it, I will be thinking about actors. And I'll be hearing certain actors' voices or seeing certain actors' shapes or figuring out what would the personality of that actor make with the character of this character, the person and the character, the person and the play together. I don't think there doesn't feel to me like there's a huge difference once the rehearsal room door closes. There's a slightly different lingo here, and there's a slightly different ways of working and so on. But once the rehearsal room door closes, you're left there to make a play in whatever it is, 4, 5, 6 weeks with a bunch of actors, and really there's no fundamental differences. There is a difference, I think, in the place that the theatre occupies in this country and our sense of what it is on the outside. The lack of subsidy, and even despite the dreadful economic problems that Ireland is having, the fact that the government fundamentally provides a fundamental subsidy for not-for-profits, which is not provided here. I think the other thing, I suppose, is that in Ireland, I think it feels possible to speak to a national audience, despite the fragmenting communities and the huge changes that have gone on. It does still seem possible from an Irish stage to speak to an entire national audience in a way that seems quite different and quite difficult here. Well, I mean, I've always loved music. I used to use live music a lot in my early work, and then it became, as the company professionalised, it became oddly enough too expensive. Because to work with live musicians on a professional level is obviously, it's a great added expense. So, you know, had my career be different, had I been a freelancer, had I come to live here, which I thought at some point in my 20s I might do, I possibly would have done musicals earlier. Certainly I always wanted to. So when I was offered an opportunity by Jack Vittel to do the encores, I was both completely terrified and thought, great, at least it's not going to take too long for me to really screw it up, because it's only a 2-week period. So in a sense, I got a chance to go out on the tightrope without even having the time to look down. And along with the colleagues, the great team that Encores puts together, plus my passion for the work and working with Warren Carlyle, I found it an absolutely exhilarating experience. But it was crazy. I mean, we had 3 rehearsal rooms on the go, both dance, music, and play or drama rehearsal. And I found it extraordinary. And the esprit de corps and just everything about it was...
If you were given the opportunity, what musical would you love to?
Oh, I'm not going to name one, but I can assure you I have a back pocket full of them, you know. Well, The Cripple of Inishmaan was written, it was actually, we premiered Beauty Queen of Leenane in London in February of 1996, and The Cripple of Inishmaan was premiered by the National Theatre in London in September or October, I think, of 1996. It's, so the play is as old as, you know, it was written at the very same time as all the other plays were. It's set on Inishmaan, and there's Cripple Billy, who is very bored. He's crippled and he's very bored. He's been reared by 2 aging aunts, or pretend aunts of his. He's very bored and he wants anything to get off the island. When he hears that a film crew, headed by a man called Robert Flaherty, has come to make a documentary about Ireland people, he resolves to get a part in it and use that as a way off the island. So it goes from there. I so absolutely never thought of my wildest dream, and I do remember it because when I came to New York first, I actually worked at a messaging company that's why I came to New York. I used to work, at that time Irish students used to be allowed to work for the summer months, and I worked as a messaging company, got just quite simply lowest level file clerking, you can imagine, but it was on something like about 57th and Broadway. So I used to walk up and down Broadway, you know, every night. The second year I was there, I worked at 41st and Broadway. So Broadway was my territory. For walking up and down, looking at posters, but I couldn't get into the shows. For that I went downtown. But then, for me to think at any point during that time that I would be inside one of those theatres, directing a play, and then winning this award that I wouldn't even have known the name of at that time, a Tony Award. No, beyond my wildest dreams.